It was like voluntarily agreeing to have a near-death experience without knowing you were going to have a near-death experience. So again, in a non-dual experience, there's no this and that. There's no subject-object kind of thing. But basically, the self ceases and returns to source, and then basically awareness exists within the light of awareness. And then it stopped. And then I found myself, and there was a guy in a robe, and I asked him, "Was that a lucid dream? What was that?"
Hello, and thanks for tuning into Power Perspectives, People, Passion, Purpose. This episode is one I've been really excited for. Get ready to dive deep into the enigmatic world of dreams with our extraordinary guest. He's a luminary in the realm of lucid dreaming, whose work is nothing short of revolutionary. As an acclaimed author, he's illuminated the path to understanding and mastering the art of lucid dreaming with his best-selling books, Lucid Dreaming, The Gateway to the Inner Self, and Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, Tips and Techniques for Insight, Creativity, and Personal Growth. With decades of experience and a passion that borders on the mystical, he's becoming a leading voice and advocate in the field, unraveling the mysteries of our subconscious minds and unlocking the potential of our dreamscapes. His expertise bridges the gap between science and spirituality, offering profound insights into how we can harness the power of our dreams for personal evolution, healing, manifesting, and even speaking to loved ones that have passed. Here to talk to us about becoming the architect of your own dreams, from initiate to master. Welcome to Power Perspectives, Robert Waggoner.
Oh, Shannon, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Oh, I am so grateful to have your time today. Now, a lot of people, which is still funny to me, are not aware of what really lucid dreaming is. And before we kind of get into unraveling that enigma of it, can you just describe for us maybe the fundamental principles of lucid dreaming? Just what is it?
Right. So a lucid dream is any dream in which you realize within the dream that you're dreaming. You literally know, hey, this is a dream. So I remember my very first lucid dream. I was probably 10 or 11 years old. And I was in my public library in my hometown looking at books. And all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this little Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur walking through the book stacks. And even though I was 10 or 11, I thought, wait a second, dinosaurs are extinct. So how can this be? And I thought, oh, I must be dreaming. This is a dream. And so I knew it was a dream. So again, a lucid dream is any dream in which you realize you're dreaming. But from there, it'll show you ways to create things, ways to manifest things, and it'll show you kind of the principles of the subconscious mind.
Wow. Yeah, and you were so young when you kind of discovered that. And I remember learning about you, like there wasn't any other literature about it at the time. So you kind of had to become your own trial and error expert. And that kind of has set your path for you being one of the, I think, the leading expert in the field right now. But how did you kind of navigate that journey?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So I had that spontaneous lucid dream when I was really young, like 10 or 11. And then it was when I was in high school. Um, I began to read this book by Carlos Castaneda, who was a UCLA anthropology graduate student. And he was trying to meet shamanic people who would teach him about mystical plants like
Yeah.
mescaline and peyote and that kind of thing. And he meets this shaman, Don Juan, who tells him he's going to teach him things. But I'm reading this book, Journey to Ixtlan, and in the book, his shamanic teacher tells him that he should try to find his hands in the dream state and become aware of dreaming. And so I thought, wait a second, you can become aware within a dream. And I thought, okay, there's not a technique in the book, so I'm just going to create my own technique. And so what I did, because I knew about the power of suggestion, so I knew about that. So every night before I'd go to sleep, if you can imagine, I would sit there in bed and look at my hands and tell myself, tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. Tonight in my dreams, I'll see my hands and realize I'm dreaming. And it was the third night that suddenly I'm walking through my high school hallway and boom, my hands pop right in front of my face. And I go, oh my God, I'm dreaming. And I had a wild lucid dream, and that just got me hooked.
Wow, it's contagious, huh? And it's so fulfilling when you actually connect. And I remember, to use your prompt and to keep looking down at my hands, and I would find in the dream state they would kind of pop up to me, like as a reminder, like, "Look at me, you want a lucid dream." But because I had watched, so much of your stuff, you actually started to be the trigger in my dreams. I was seeing Robert Waggoner in my dreams, and I was like, "Oh, I'm lucid dreaming. Robert's here." So that was like a very interesting way to prompt it. But yeah. And does that always work for you? Like now you're so experienced, can you just drop right in or do you still have to do a prompt?
Yeah, over the course of time, so I began with that finding my hands technique and doing that practice every night before I went to sleep. And by doing that, I'd have, I don't know, 2 to 4 lucid dreams a month. And sometimes I'd be climbing a ladder and see my hands and go, "Oh, my hands, this is a dream." Or I'd be opening a door and see my hands, this is a dream. But what I began to see is that there's actually other techniques that you can use that'll help you induce lucid dreams. And but that was kind of a good one for beginners because it's kind of like you need a symbol to help you realize this is a dream.
Mm.
See your hands, this is a dream. See Robert Waggoner, oh, this is probably a dream, and all that kind of stuff. It's funny. I talked to a gentleman who attended a workshop I did in Los Angeles, and he told me that he was really successful with this technique. But one time, his hands popped in front of his face, but he was so involved in the dream that he just kept doing, what was going on in the dream. And finally, he said his hands started to hit him in the face, and then he realized, "Oh yeah, this is a dream. I'm dreaming this." And another time, a woman told me that she was doing the technique as she was sitting there in bed before sleep, and her husband came to bed and said, "What are you doing? Looking at your hands." And she explained the process. And what happens that night? His hands pop up in front of his face and he becomes lucidly aware.
Oh,
So that's how I got started. But I began to learn other techniques as I went along. But lucid dreaming does require, kind of focus and intent and practice if you really want to become skilled at it.
absolutely. Just like any other skill, but it's so mystical and magical. And before we kind of get into all of the potentials that lucid dreaming has, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about the science. And I think I watched something of yours that maybe it was 1980, not until the 80s did science really acknowledge that lucid dreaming had, these abilities to reach our subconscious mind. But would you mind kind of sharing what evidence supports the efficacy of lucid dreams that you found?
Yeah, I recall the morning of in January 1981. I was at my university library. It was so cold outside. I just jumped into the library, just to warm up. And I went over to the magazines, and there was Psychology Today. And in there was an article by this researcher, Stephen LaBerge, on scientific evidence for lucid dreaming. And I was blown away because up until that time, there hadn't been any scientific evidence. It was kind of something that people talked about, but there just wasn't evidence. So here's what he did. He himself was a pretty good lucid dreamer. And so he realized that in dreams, we have rapid eye movement. So if you watch a little baby, or sometimes you even watch your dog or cat, you'll see their eyes flitting around, while they're asleep. And there's a good chance when you're having rapid eye movement that you're experiencing a dream. And so what he thought is, what if I went into a dream state and put rapid eye movement pads on my eyes to record my dream movements?
Mm.
And what if in that dream I became lucidly aware and knew it was a dream? And then in that lucid dream where I know it's a lucid dream, what if I decided to look left and right 8 times? Would that show up on the rapid eye movement pad and be on the readout? And so in the late 70s, he began to do these experiments where he would go into the sleep lab, put all the gadgets on. They would also have measures to show he was still in the sleep state and he hadn't had a micro awakening or anything. But over 30 lucid dreams, he signaled with his eyes, "Hey, I'm lucidly aware in here." And he presented the evidence. And at first, people just, "This cannot be, this is too wild." But finally, because it could be replicated by other scientists and other lucid dreamers, finally people accepted that lucid dreaming was a legitimate and valid scientific phenomenon.
It's funny it would even take so long. Like we'd have known about the dream states through indigenous cultures and for thousands and thousands of years in yoga nidra and the like. But what I do want to get into some advanced kind of stuff that you've done because it's incredibly mind blowing. But just to start off, for somebody that we've shared the hand technique, but is there any other you've got your tips and techniques for beginners? Maybe when they realize that they're like myself, I get too excited and I pop out, and they're like, I just finished another dream. But what are some kind of tips for staying in the dream, in the lucid dream state, that you could share with beginners?
That I give workshops, and that's probably the number one complaint is, oh, I became lucid, but 5 seconds later, I was so excited, I popped out and woke up. And so that's the very first thing I always try to teach people is as soon as you become aware, especially if you're new to lucid dreaming, remind yourself to stay calm. Because if you get too excited and too happy and too like, wow, you're just going to pop out. And so to stay calm, there's various things you can do. First, I've realized that in lucid dreams, if you just tell yourself stay calm, then you're much more likely to stay calm. Suddenly, it's like the dream reflects what you've announced, stay calm. Sometimes if I get too excited, I'll look back at my hands, and sometimes that kind of stabilizes the lucid dream. And then there's been other times, when someone knocks on your door and you open the door and there's Tom Cruise with a pizza, and you think, wait a second, what is Tom Cruise doing as a pizza delivery guy? And you become lucidly aware. But sometimes you're so excited, oh, Tom Cruise is right there. You get so excited. So that's when I've realized, oh, you got to turn away from what the exciting thing is and look down at something boring like the floor or the wallpaper or whatever, just to kind of chill. Because that's what you realize. You can get pretty emotional, in a happy way or whatever, and stay in the lucid dream. But if you go too much, then you're going to pop out. So that's the kind of rule number one. I think that every lucid dreamer learns. You just got to stay chill.
Stay chill, regulate, breathe. Okay, that's great. And I mean, some of your examples and stories that you've shared of lucid dreamers and over the decades that you've been in this world, and you've got the Lucid Dreaming Experience magazine, and people can submit their experiences. Some incredible things have come out of that. But what I really kind of wanted to ask you about that is, people have shared that they've healed, they've overcome phobias, they've overcome trauma, they've manifested things. People with creative blocks have found their path again. What explains that? How do you think that works?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what happens is that when you become aware within the dream state, you're actually becoming aware at a deeper level of the subconscious mind. And now that you're aware at this deep level, just like in deep hypnosis, people who are bleeding can stop bleeding, and people in deep hypnosis can, make things appear and make things disappear, and do all sorts of just incredible things. When you become lucidly aware in a lucid dream, whether you know it or not, and it might take a while before you figure it out, you can do some fantastic things to um, access creativity, heal emotional trauma, heal physical issues within lucid dreams. You can also use it for spiritual practices and also to engage your inner self. So, what I think the beautiful thing about lucid dreaming is that it allows us to connect with the deeper portions of ourself. And when we learn how to use it, then we can use it for the good of our waking life.
Yes, and that's so amazing because you're really talking to, I mean, your book is the gateway to the inner self. And that's such a huge, you think you know yourself, and then there's this plethora of Tom Cruises that show up with pizza. And you kind of, I love that you ask, what does this represent? And you've kind of bypassed now talking to your dream characters. You actually just speak to the awareness behind that. Can you describe a little bit about that journey and how it feels and who you think is responding?
Yeah, so I taught myself how to lucid dream in 1975 using the hands technique. And then in 1985, I was part of a lucid dream explorers group. And every month we had a goal to achieve. And one month there in 1985, it was to find out what the dream figures in your lucid dream represent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I became aware, followed a woman into an office, and now there's a receptionist, two women in the office, and this guy in a three-piece suit. And I walked up to the gentleman and I just asked him in a very nice way, "Excuse me, what do you represent?" And here's the weird thing that happened. Instead of the dream figure responding, which is what I expected, all of a sudden, a voice from above, a non-visible voice, expressed what he kind of represented. And it didn't make complete sense. And so I just looked up and I said, blah, 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 what? And then it's like it had to think, and then it expressed exactly what this dream figure represented. And so I thought, okay, I've achieved the goal. I'm going to wake up and write this down. And so I woke up and wrote it down. But then I began to think, what was this non-visible voice that responded to my question? What's going on here? Is there an awareness behind the dream? And so after that, I began in almost all my lucid dreams to ignore the dream figures, ignore the dream setting, just push all that aside. And I would just look up and ask questions like, hey, dream, show me something important for me to see. And sometimes the entire lucid dream would change and I'd be in a totally new environment, seeing something important for me to see. Or sometimes one little thing would change. And as I kept going, I would ask to experience concepts. And all of a sudden, I would be in a concept. And it was like, oh my God, this is a mind blow. And so I just kept going deeper and deeper to see how deep is this inner awareness's knowledge? What does it really know? And so that's the beautiful thing about lucid dream. Anyone can do this. Anyone can explore it. But you're right. That's why I called that my first book, Lucid Dreaming, Gateway to the Inner Self, because I think lucid dreaming actually allows us a way to communicate with our inner self. And there's some dramatic examples of people who've had life-changing transformations when they begin to communicate with their inner self in lucid dreams.
Wow. And I mean, there's so much to dive into there, but have you ever hit the bottom of what your subconscious has shared with you, or is it just a continually expanding vortex there?
It just kept going so deep. One thing I realized, though, is that sometimes the only inhibitor or the only kind is the person and their kind of what they're dealing with. Like my I have a friend, Ed Kellogg, fantastic lucid dreamer, been lucid dreaming 30, 40 years. So one time, because he was so interested in modern physics, he asked in a lucid dream to his larger awareness, he just looked up and said, by the power of Alcahest, let a superstring manifest. And a superstring is something in modern physics, kind of a theoretical idea. And all of a sudden, this non-visible voice told him that at this time, he seemed too unfocused to continue and distracted. And it basically went on to tell him that to ask for something like that, he had to be totally there, totally present, totally engaged, and basically told him to come back later. and Ed mentioned, that in that lucid dream, there was a woman in a bathing suit was, off to the corner, and he was a little bit distracted and all. But what I found beautiful about that is that this inner self kind of is aware not to give you too much. If you're not ready for it, if you can't handle it, basically it tells you, okay, you got to come back when you're ready for that. And sometimes it'll refute your assumption. Like in my book, I share an example of a woman who has a big lucid dreaming online forum at LD for All, and her name is Pascal. And so in their group, they were doing monthly goals. And one month they decided that they would, in a lucid dream, the goal was to find the beginning and the end of the universe.
Wow.
So she becomes lucidly aware. She goes over to a mirror and she announces, now show me the beginning and end of the universe. And suddenly this non-visible voice replies, the universe has no beginning and has no end. the universe is an everlasting cycle.
Wow.
And so here you can see how the inner awareness is basically refuting her assumption that there's a beginning and an end, and just saying that, nope, this is an everlasting cycle. This is something that continues. So that's the beauty of it. I've done some really wild things. Now I get to the point, and I'll tell you how wild this is. Now I'll get to the point. I was asked to experience a really advanced topic, but I'll say I want to experience whatever it is, but just for 1 minute, because I know the energy will be so intense that I can only handle it for about 1 minute.
Wow.
And as soon as I ask that, boom, I'll be in a totally new lucid dream, having a totally powerful, energetic experience. And then at 1 minute, boom, it stops and I'm back in that regular lucid dream. And I'm just like, thank you, because otherwise sometimes the energy is too much. One time I asked to experience the energy of the universe, and my lucid dream opened up like a crack, like a slit in the theater curtain opened up, and this brilliant white light was just shooting into my hands, my chest, my forehead, my entire body. And after about a minute or two, I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, time out, stop.
Wow.
Can't take it anymore. And so that's how incredible it can get. But here's what I've learned. If you're afraid, you'll restrict it.
Right.
If you get freaked out, you'll pop out. And so that's why you got to, keep your head together. And that's also why I learned as I went deeper into lucid dreaming, I always had to confront my fears.
Yeah.
If I ever saw any concerns or fears appear in my lucid dreams, instead of running away, which I could do, or fighting it, I had to make peace with it, understand it, resolve it, and that was the only way forward. And so that's one of the beauties of lucid dream. It shows you that, it's not that you have all this power, you got to do your inner work too. If you don't resolve your fears, they'll be there, some other time. You got to just keep resolving the fears.
You make it sound so simple, but it's this entire dissemination or changing of your perspective, and
Right.
some of this stuff, like I know you've had some crazy experiences, and one of them I would love to chat about, just with past life experiences. Like, as a child, I think you have one, you're tasting wine and you felt like an older man sitting in a chair. I was like, wow. And another lady that you could feel her life, that was yours. And that's extraordinary, and a lot of people can't really fathom that, let alone bring back that experience and share it. How does that feel to be in another body, have it occupy another lifetime?
This is one thing that started to happen about the time I began to lucid dream as a teenager. I also began to have these experiences that in the dream state, I would find myself looking through someone else's eyes.
Yeah.
And to your point, the first time it happened, I'm looking through the eyes of this gentleman, and he has these big, thick arms, and I'm probably a 15-year-old kid at the time or whatever. And in his hand, he has a glass of red wine. And so I'm a kid. We grew up in a family that never had alcohol in the house. I had never drank wine up to that point. And what was weird is I looked around the room as I'm looking through his eyes, and I can see those gas lights. And this is something they had around 1900. They'd have gas lights in people's houses and stuff. And then I thought, where am I? And it's kind of like I knew I was in Rotterdam. And, I'm a little kid growing up in the Midwest. I'd never been to Rotterdam, didn't care about Rotterdam. And then suddenly this gentleman, he takes this glass of red wine and brings it up to his lips and takes a drink. And the red wine just exploded in my mouth. And I'm like, whoa. I woke up thinking, is that what wine tastes like? That was incredible. But this kept happening. It's probably happened, I don't know, 15 or 20 times. And sometimes I can confirm the visual thing. Like one time I found myself looking through the eyes of this gentleman, and he had on these heavy wool clothing, and he was sitting cross-legged. And in front of him, he has this silver metal tablet that has like 2 pages. And hammered into the metal is this ancient language. And so I'm looking through his eyes, and he's looking at this metal tablet. And I ask, what is this? And suddenly I hear the Heart Sutra. And so I go, okay, this guy is reading an ancient version of the Heart Sutra. And he flips over the page and all. I awake and I think, okay, that was really strange. And so I can really recall the writing that was hammered into the silver tablet book. And so I began to search, is this Sanskrit? No, it's not Sanskrit. Is this Pali? No, it's not Pali. I kept Googling and Googling until I found an ancient language that was used from the 3rd century to the 6th century of traders between India and China.
Wow.
And the Heart Sutra is all, it's, I don't know how many words it is, maybe 2,000 words or something. It's not a very long sutra. Maybe it's, I don't know, 1,000 words. And 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 they still have scraps of this language in certain museums, uh, you know, uh, way over there. But it was a language that was used for like 300 or 400 years. And of course, India is where Buddhism began, and then it spread to China in that time. And I think, maybe in that life, I was actually helping as a trader, to share this new knowledge into China and all. Really wild, but some of this stuff you can confirm, and it's really mind blowing when you can confirm it. It's like, oh my God, this is wild.
You must get full body chills of like experiencing a past life and knowing that you were meant to have that information reappear in this life.
I remember one, it was, and I was pretty young when this happened, looking through the eyes of a woman. And this woman had this heavy, white cloth, and she was in kind of a cabin. And I could just feel her mind and her thinking. She was so intelligent, but also she was so kind of sarcastic and bitter at the same time. And I have to admit, when I was young, I was the most sarcastic little guy. I had 4 older brothers, and maybe that was my way of dealing with the world, is just being sarcastic. But anyway, she takes the cloth and she's going up to the upper level of the cabin, and she stops and looks through this little tiny glass window, and she's looking out at this harbor, and I can see the tall ships out there with their sails down, anchored in the harbor. And I'm thinking, boy, this is weird because uh, I can see the ocean, but the ocean is to the south. The mouth of the harbor is to the south. And I ask, where is this? And suddenly I have this non-visible awareness tell me Gloucester. And so I don't know, Gloucester doesn't really mean anything to me. Anyway, I can see all this. And then I wake up and I think, okay, I'm pretty sure that's the Atlantic Ocean, but the harbor opened to the south, and everyone knows that the Atlantic is to the east. But then I go to my atlas and find Gloucester, Massachusetts, and there they have a harbor that opens to the south. And then I start to think, ever since I was a little kid, I have always just had a negative thing about the Boston area. I live 1,500 miles away. I'd never been to Boston, but I just had this negative Boston thing. And I think what I was seeing was through the eyes of a woman who was one of the first settlers there in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and they have an incredible harbor there. And so about 10 years ago, I decided to visit Gloucester, Mass, and I found the exact spot where that cabin was, which was about 50 yards west of the original settlement of British soldiers and others who came to Massachusetts, in like 1640. And the people who came were basically the Puritans, and they were trying to be pure religious people. But I think this woman realized that her husband was away, and they didn't know if he had drowned at sea or found another wife in another port or whatever. And so she just had no status. She had And she was so intelligent and so, deep, but at the same time, she was so bitter and sarcastic about this strange world of Puritanism that really men were up here and women were like down there. And I'll tell you, Shannon, after that, I really had a deeper understanding of what women face in the world, and oftentimes, especially when the world and the religion is structured such that you don't have the same rights and privileges as the men do. And I thought, wow, it was really something. And also after that, my sarcasm basically decreased by 90%.
You satiated someone from the past.
Yeah, and so sometimes I think you kind of heal some of these past issues
I
with these
think so.
experiences. Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible, Robert. Like I have heard that. I've heard you tell that story before, but it's still just so incredible. And I've been places I've first stepped foot in, like say the Ganges River in India, and just seeing it, I'm like, I know I've been here before. I know I've never been here, but I know I've been here before. What did that feel like when you were connecting this lady with yourself?
Yeah. What was so wild is there when I was in Gloucester trying to figure out, the exact way that I'd seen the harbor and where the boats were moored in the harbor and everything. As soon as I found the exact place, there was a nearby grove of trees, and all of a sudden, all these crows just began cawing, like 100 crows, just and it was really a surreal moment. But to go back there and realize that was truly profound. I think the one thing you know that I've realized about this area, I think in lucid dreams, we can begin to explore uh, past lives, that there's more to this self. Not only in a lucid dream can you interact with the inner self, with your kind of larger awareness, but you can also begin to, in certain cases, begin to look into past lives. And it's really fantastic and not really very well explored area because a lot of people just never get there or they don't believe in it and don't want to explore it.
For sure. And I guess you can't get somewhere that you don't believe. And
Yeah, that's what you learn. If you don't believe it, basically the door's closed, and it's when you're willing to investigate it. You don't have to believe it. You just have to have an openness to investigate it. I think that's when the door opens.
And I do think there's like your higher self is aware of your desire to do something, and then it can help you depending on your own path and what you're supposed to unravel and what you're not. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I do remember, I think you were on another podcast. It was so interesting. And I think you had um, maybe seen an oracle, or you meditated in the dream and were able to connect into like a dream within a dream within a dream. And do you know which one I'm talking about? Because I'm sure you have hundreds, but
Oh,
I think it kind of implied that you were an ascended master. And I completely understand why I was so nervous to speak to you, because I do feel like that, like speaking to an ascended master, it's gone through
well,
time. Like, what is
yeah,
some of your craziest experiences?
yeah. Probably one of my craziest experiences. Now that we're talking about out of bodies, is I had one of my brothers. So I had four older brothers and a younger sister, and one of my brothers passed away. The night he passed away, I became lucidly aware and basically met all of his past lives.
Wow.
And what was interesting, if you can imagine this, I step into this kind of big conference room, and all of them are seated, and the seating is done in a backward swastika, which in Buddhism is the wheel of samsara.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the wheel of all of the lives. And I go walking in there, and if you can imagine meeting about 140, 160 past lives. And so they're from all civilizations. Most of them are ancient. Most of them, are really humble and impoverished people. Some of them I could tell were really psychically awakened. That they were the ones who came up to me. But when I got there, I realized, wow, the only place left for me to sit, if I wanted to sit, would be in the hub of the circle, kind of where emptiness is
Mhm.
and all. And it kind of made me realize that my brother wanted me to understand that he was coming to the end. But the thing that blew my mind was the idea that when it comes to reincarnations, like a lot of us think, oh, yeah, I've had maybe 5 or 10 or whatever. I think the average person has, you know, will probably spend like 100 lives in this, earth realm before they move on, before they learn what they have needed to learn, before they understand what they need to understand. And it was really a gift to see that because, uh, you know, uh, I really care for my brother and loved him, of course. But then I realized that, oh, wow, his the essence of him is eternal.
Yeah.
And though he's appeared in all these different lives and had all these experiences, the essence of him isn't eternal. And I think that's what all the wisdom traditions are trying to get across, that fundamentally there's a portion of us that survives and moves through and continues.
That can be quite healing for people that have lost someone. And I mean, you've also shared how you can talk with people that have passed on the other side. And that's really special for some people that just can't seem to get out of the grieving state. What are some stories that you've heard around that have kind of been special for you?
Yeah, I had my own special one about 2 years ago. So, if I recall correctly, this was the very first dream of January 1st of what year would that be? Of 2022.
Mm.
And so it's the very first dream, and I see my deceased mother-in-law, right, and her name is Nona, and I go and I first I started to laugh because because I was thinking she's been dead 10 years now, and finally she comes to talk to me. And so at first I started to crack up. But what was interesting about seeing her is she didn't look like the 80-some-year-old woman who I recall who passed away. She looked like she was about 40 years old. Looked like she had actually sewn the blue dress that she was wearing. She was kind of a seamstress in waking life, and she was smiling. And I see her, and I become lucidly aware because Nona passed away 10 years ago. This has to be a dream. So in these cases, I try to approach them as rationally as a person can. And so I don't know, am I dealing with a memory of Nona or Nona as a dream symbol, kind of a product of my mind? Or am I dreaming of Nona as a spiritual being in the after death state? I just don't know. And so that's why I always encourage people to do this. Go up to the deceased dream figure and say, what do you have to say to me? Or why are you here?
Yeah.
Something like that, some open-ended question just to let them express themselves.
Mm.
And and so I go up to her and say, so Nona, what do you have to say to me? And she says, I want you to know that September is a very important month. And so I kind of start laughing and I joke with her and I say, well, Nona, if you feel and believe that September is important, I'm sure it's important. And she goes, no, I want you to understand that September is going to be a very important month. And so I decide to wake up and write this down. And when I wake up, I think, oh my God, Nona is telling me that my mom's going to pass away, you know? And so I wake up with that and I tell my wife, your mom came in a dream last night and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my wife and I went to see my mom the last weekend of August, and the next weekend of September, she passed away. And so it's one of those kind of beautiful things, we all think about moms and they carry us for 9 months before we're born. And in this particular case, I received 9 months warning that my mom was going to pass away. And the beautiful thing was that I was able to call my mom more, spend more time and attention with her, even though she lives eight hours away. I was still able to visit her, the final week of her life and all. But it's kind of one of those amazing things you think, wow, that's to get that kind of heads up for me was really a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and I mean, you're super tuned in and turned on to this, and some people might think we're just when you get a message, you're still aware, okay, this is my subconscious. Is this my own projection of something? But when you get such a specificity, or, you have another story even where you knew your grandpa had given you money, I think that you weren't told by anyone else. You heard it in a dream from him. That's stuff that you can't make up. It's not, oh, I projected this from something I thought I knew. You didn't have the information at all, or even the means to it.
Right.
So how do you think
Well,
that kind of works?
The one thing I think I've realized is that the ones that we love who pass away oftentimes are still connected with us.
Yeah.
Not in an every moment of the hour kind of way, but when there's a need, they connect. So like I was mentioning my brother who had passed away. A few years after he'd passed away, I'd been invited by this group to come down to North Carolina and create this online workshop on lucid dreaming. And so I got a frequent flyer ticket to fly down to North Carolina on an airline I just have no status on. And so anyway, uh, I'm I have my phone on, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings. Your flight has been canceled, due to bad weather, and outside it snowed like 8 inches or something. So I thought, okay, I'm going to drive down to the airport because they've rebooked me the next morning, at 6:30 a.m. or whatever. So now I'm at a hotel by the airport, and at 4 o'clock in the morning, the phone rings, and your flight has been canceled again. And I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Am I not supposed to be doing this or what? So I fall back asleep, and as I'm waking up, I hear my brother say to me as clearly as you and I talking, just be extra kind. And I thought, what? And then I heard him say it again, just be extra kind. And so I woke up and I thought, I don't know what my deceased brother was trying to tell me there, just be extra kind. What does that mean? And so I decided I'm going to go to the airport, even though they've canceled my flight again. I'm going to go to the airport and see if I can somehow, get to North Carolina. I go to the airport, and everyone is so mean to the gate person. Just, oh, you ruined my vacation. You're blah blah, and just, oh my God, they were so. And that's when I realized, just be extra kind. I knew what my brother wanted me to do. I stepped up to the counter. I'm on a frequent flyer ticket. And I asked her, I said, I really would love to get to Charlotte, North Carolina, if you could help me in any way. She sat there for 5 minutes, and then she printed out 3 tickets and got me to Charlotte like an hour later than I was supposed to. And I'll tell you, it would have been so easy to get angry and upset like all the other people. But my brother, who he himself was a charmer, he was such an incredible charmer. People just loved him. When he told me just to be extra kind, and I walked up there and got a ticket, no one else was getting tickets. I got a ticket. It just shows you that a connection still exists. A connection still exists, and I don't think my deceased relatives are monitoring me or my family, constantly. But I think they're there, in moments when you need some help, and sometimes in the sleep state, that's when we're kind of more open to suggestions. And so my brother could insert that, just be extra kind.
That's so special and great reminders. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is yoga nidra is essentially lucid dreaming. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, because it is a lot more to the practice and more with religious kind of elements. But have you had experiences like with a transformative, enlightening kind of yoga nidra aspect of speaking to something higher?
Well, so I I don't want to say that I'm really super knowledgeable in this area.
Mm-hmm.
I've read a bit about it. I kind of conceptually understand it. And then I see different teachers bringing up different stuff, and I don't know. So I think there's kind of a root, and you have to go to the root where it all started, Yoga Nidra, to kind of understand what it truly is all about. I'll tell you the one time that I did a Yoga Nidra, it's probably the first time I ever did a formal Yoga Nidra. There was a graduate student who was at a dream conference, and he announced that he was going to do it. And so all of us are laying down, and I can't remember, but he just went into kind of ask us to close our eyes, lay on the ground, get into this meditative thing. What I did, I just had this intuitive idea to move my awareness into my heart. So if you can imagine moving your awareness into your heart. And as I continued to focus on that and focus on my heart, all of a sudden I saw this amazing gold light. And then it was like this vibrating energy emerging from this gold light. And it was like, wow, if this is Yoga Nidra, this is a far out experience. So again, I'm just I know there's a whole tradition to it and all that kind of thing, but for me it was really a powerful experience of light, energy, and sound all together. And I think in many ways some of these practices takes us to the source of ourself, which is basically beyond the physical. And so I think Yoga Nidra is a really powerful practice.
I think you've kind of transformed, like made some elements your own without knowing it, just in your own way. But you spoke of golden light. And I know that you've had another experience of just, you wanted to write in your journal what you experienced the night before, but it was just blue light. You were just engulfed, or you were blue light. Have you kind of come to any more conclusions about what that meant for you?
Yeah, so that happened after I'd been lucid dreaming for 20 years. I began to realize that every dream and lucid dream is a creation of the mind, and it normally follows our beliefs and expectation, our focus and intent, kind of where our head's at. And then I began to see, gosh, waking life is actually kind of much the same, that it follows our beliefs and expectation and our focus and intent. And then I began to think, well, if those are all mental creations, the waking dream and the lucid dream and the regular dream, is there a real reality? Is there something beyond all of that that's not connected to my beliefs, expectation, focus, and intent? And that's when I would start to fall asleep. And at night, it would be nothing but blue light. The entire night, nothing but blue light. And the first time it happened, I did wake up and I thought, what do I put in my dream journal? Blue light? Because there's no me, no action, no plot, no symbols, just blue light the entire night. And I remember one morning after a night of blue light, I came down to the breakfast table, and my wife looked at me and said, "What is happening to you?" And I laughed and I said, "Why are you asking me that?" She said, "Last night I looked at your face and I've never seen someone in such bliss before." She said, "What is happening to you?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to understand the actual nature of reality, and I'm having some really weird experiences." And so, I mentioned this in my first book and how it went on a little bit further until one night my inner awareness told me that if I wanted to go to the distance, that I might cease to be. And I told my inner awareness that I allow myself to cease to be because I know Robert is kind of a small aspect of a much larger awareness. And then I I feel that I went on to have what people call a non-dual experience. So that's how wild this whole path of lucid dreaming can be. But again, you have to work through your own stuff, because sometimes I was shown in my lucid dreams that I had limiting beliefs that were keeping me from growing.
Wow.
And sometimes I was shown that I had fears that I needed to move beyond if I was going to open up the pathway. And all along the way, it's a transformational process. You have to work on your own stuff if you really want to go the distance. But that's how beautiful lucid dreaming is. And it did surprise me years later to realize that lucid dreaming has many thousands of years history in Buddhism, Sufism, Taoism, native shamanic traditions. They've all used used lucid dreaming as a way to explore our inner nature and I think really what people would call our spiritual nature.
Wow. And you kind of downplayed that. You're like, oh, I had like a non-dual experience. Like, that's huge. That's experiencing the nature of a true reality. And I think most people can't really fathom that. But I've experienced it with psychedelics and ceremony, but to have that of your own accord without needing something extra, hugely powerful, and that can be hugely transformative. And with the blue light thing, I don't know if this resonates, but I have read, your guides or your higher fractals of self can be sending you upgrades, and that light and that healing is, I don't know if it's a DNA uplifting upgrade, something like that, but when you're able to access the feeling of non-duality, that's huge. And in our 3D kind of day-to-days, we're not there. So in feeling that way, what was it like to have the true nature of reality be experiencing that?
I'll tell you what it was like. It was like voluntarily agreeing to have a near-death experience without knowing you were going to have a near-death experience. So again, in a non-dual experience, there's no this and that. There's no subject-object kind of thing. But basically, the self ceases and returns to source, and then basically awareness exists within the light of awareness. And then it stopped, and then I found myself, and there was a guy in a robe, and I asked him, was that a lucid dream? What was that? And he goes, oh no, to enter a lucid dream, go here. And I stepped into that space and started going through this tunnel of light until I pop into a lucid dream. But when I woke up in the morning, I thought, what was that first part? Because awareness within awareness, from that, I realized that we all exist within an interconnected oneness. That a lot of spiritual teachers say, that the world is perfect as it is now. And that's because we exist within an educational system and interconnected oneness. And some of our education is learning some hard lessons because we don't practice things as we should. But yeah, the experience was really like, without understanding what I agreed to, it was like allowing myself to cease to be, to have a near-death experience, to return to the light, be the light, and realize that everything, we have all this appearance, but behind all of this is this light of awareness that enlivens everything that exists.
Did you have a feeling of fear of I might not exist after this, or in the dream you kind of just trusted the ceasing to be as another state of transformation?
When my larger awareness told me, it said basically, if you want to go the whole distance, you might cease to be. It basically told me that I might die. I told my larger awareness, I said, I realize that Robert is a small aspect of a much larger whole. Yeah. And I said, if I don't allow myself to have this experience, then this whole path, what will it have been for? And so I said, I agree to allow myself to cease to be. Because I think I was really, you get really deep down and you really want to understand the actual nature of things. You really want to understand it. It's really, all the money and all the whatever and all the fame and all the whatever, it doesn't matter. The understanding matters. And I just truly wanted to understand. So, yeah, so it's amazing. It was only years later, about 3 years later, I heard this speaker, Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, who wrote the Tibetan Yogas of Dream and Sleep. He said the ultimate goal of Buddhist dream yoga is the non-dual state, the experience of the clear light of awareness by awareness itself. And I was like, oh my God, there's a name for this. There's a tradition for this. Because I grew up in the Midwest. I didn't grow up around Buddhist anything. Yeah. And when I tried to read Buddhist stuff, there's so many translation issues. I just never explored Buddhism in any way, shape, or form. But that's when I began to realize that there's something to that, and that's really that they have their own kind of pathway. And I kind of realized that I kind of bushwhacked my way, without actually understanding their pathway. I just kind of bushwhacked my way, just kind of realizing, that if everything is a co-creation of my mind and my beliefs, expectation, and focus and intent, is there a real reality? And that's when things really started to move forward.
It sounds like I mean, it is your higher calling, but not just for yourself. What you've shared really opens up people's imaginations, people's ability to trust themselves and to actually go deeper into that dream space. But what I kind of wanted to ask is, do you have anything that you want people to know more about your work that is often either misconceived or just people don't know about? Is there something that you kind of want to address with people about lucid dreamings that can really help them?
Yeah, one thing I think that people need to understand is lucid dreaming does not mean control.
Right.
It's true you can influence things and manipulate things, but at its highest, I think lucid dreaming is really relating with greater awareness to the dream and the awareness behind the dream, to the larger mind. And when you start to see it in that way, you realize it's a relationship. It's not dominance over, it's a relationship. Then the other thing I want people to realize is that I remember one time a guy came up to me and told me my second book, Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple, had saved his life. And then his wife came up and told me the same thing. So I asked him to tell me the story. And he said what happened was that he grew up in a dysfunctional family and he would have nightmares all the time. And in his nightmares, there'd be angry figures who he'd either have to fight him or run away from him. And so he'd often become lucid because, oh yeah, there's that mean guy again. And now I know this is a dream, but now I got to fight him or run away. And so he said he read my book and I suggested a different approach, which was um, love and accept aggressive dream figures.
Mm.
Send them whatever they lack. If they're full of hate, send them love. If they're needy and unaccepted, accept them. And you'll watch them totally transform. And if you totally accept them, they'll turn into light. So he was an engineer in waking life. And so now in all of his lucid dreams, he began to love and send compassion and understanding to every dream figure. And he said what was weird is he noticed about 2 or 3 weeks later, his people at work, his coworkers were all nice to him now. They weren't ragging on him and telling him what an idiot he was and stuff. And then about 2 months later, he realized his entire family had changed. Now, instead of being this totally dysfunctional family, now they were interested in spiritual and religious concepts. And they would sit there and get together and talk about spiritual things. And he said, by healing on the inner level, all these characters, all these figures, all these representations, it healed his outer life. And he said, that just having that new way of approaching dream figures just totally transformed things. So it's amazing how just one little idea like that, can touch a person and change their life.
That's so powerful. And I mean, it makes sense. Everything is energy. And so within, so without. And it kind of has a similar principle to that, like Ho'oponopono, where you send a blessing for your own stuff, but it affects you in the outer world. That's amazing. Robert, I'm so unfortunately sad that we're running out of time, but can you share how people can learn more about your work and purchase your book?
Yeah. So one of my websites is lucid-dreaming-advice.com. And there you can read about my books and also see the upcoming workshops that I'm doing. I'm doing some here in the next month. And also people can ask me questions there too, because sometimes people want to share experiences. And so lucid-dreaming-advice.com. That's how they can get to me.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I'll put some links into the descriptions. And your books are available on your website as well as Amazon or something?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Audible. They're in all those different forms, and also they've been translated into 8 languages. So if you speak French or German or whatever, I have a book for you.
I mean, that is terrific. And I think everybody should get your book, especially people that want to have these grand transformations but are kind of stuck in the 3D version of it. Robert, it's been absolutely amazing for your time today. Thank you so, so, so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Shannon. It's so nice to meet you, and lucid wishes to everyone out there. And I do hope we all begin to wake up as a world to create a better world and to create a more loving world as well.
Oh man, and you're showing people how to do it through your subconscious mind. And the best way to heal the world, right, is heal you first, and that shows through.
So thank you again.